Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you guys joining us. As Doug said, the three of us work for Halco Home Solutions. My name is Brandon Granger. I'm the company's sales manager. I've been with the company for a little over 13 years. During that 13 years, I spent roughly 6 years running our service department, 2 years doing sales, as these two fine young people next to me are doing now, and then I'm going on 5 years now of being the company sales manager. So I'll let the two of them introduce themselves quick, and we'll get started.
Okay. I'm Alicia Casper. I've been with Halco about 10 years now. I've done a little bit of everything at Halco. A majority of my time there has been office manager and working with my NYSERDA programs directly. I switched out into the sales role about 1.5 years ago and have loved it. So here to share the fun.
My name is Trevor. I've been in the industry since 2017, started with a small company named Snug Planet. It was a great company down in Ithaca, New York, and transferred over to Halco, and also did a little stint down in central Pennsylvania where I sold HVAC down there. So always joke that I went from selling super green to selling oil down in central Pennsylvania. And then came back and have been right back at Halco. So.
Yeah, again, really appreciate everybody joining us today. So, and obviously the session we're going to talk specifically about electrification of mobile homes, which I think is it's an excellent topic. It can sometimes be a very difficult topic, and I think a lot of contractors, including us, along the years have found it to be not always the easiest application. This is just a quick little, yes, we do that. This is kind of one of our posters that we're proud of. Basically shows all the different services that Halco offers and all the things that Hale's got us out there doing. So a couple quick facts on mobile homes. So there are currently over 4 million manufactured homes in the United States. There's over 85,000 in New York State, with over 1,800 total manufactured home parks. Over 20 million Americans, most low to moderate income, are the ones that are residing in these homes. And yeah. This is just a quick map kind of showing you the percentages of mobile homes in different areas. And obviously, certain states obviously have a much larger population of mobile homes as a whole. So the biggest thing to look at when you are doing this are the challenges and the obstacles that you're going to potentially run into. So the things that we like to look at and attempt to overcome or look at initially when we're doing our initial evaluation, you do a quick plumbing inspection. So we use, and we'll get into that later, we use high pressure spray foam when we're encapsulating a mobile home underbelly. Jeff from Wise did a great presentation this morning, talked a little bit about that earlier. It's something we've been doing for many years. One of the main things that we do when we have our home solutions experts out doing their home energy audits is we do a plumbing inspection. That plumbing inspection is pretty quick and easy. So while we're underneath looking at that belly, measuring the existing insulation, evaluating things, basically have the homeowner at that point turn on all the plumbing fixtures. Well, why do we want to do that? We don't want to trap any water or moisture behind that spray foam, obviously. So the first thing we want to make sure is we've got no leaks, and if there are leaks, we want to get those taken care of before we do any type of insulation. Obviously do an evaluation of the existing insulation, and you're going to find a wide variety of things. You're going to find some underbellies have absolutely nothing. You're going to find some underbellies that are completely destroyed. The insulation's falling everywhere. It looks like a cat has made its home for the last couple of years, and it's a nightmare. Some bellies are wonderful. They're completely intact. You've got double layered fiberglass. So it just depends on the application, the age of the mobile home. Obviously you want to evaluate the existing electrical service, and I would probably argue that this is the most difficult part of the process. More often than not, when you're looking at the electrical in a mobile home, it's typically going to be in a park, which doesn't always make it easy if you have to do a service upgrade. So obviously you want to do an evaluation of the existing electrical service. Obviously do an evaluation of the HVAC issues, do the best you can to do a true evaluation of the existing duct system, which is always fun in a mobile home. Look at the appliances, look at costs. So I'll let you take the next, young lady. We already talked a little bit about it. But.
Yeah. So first thing, like you said, we always want to inspect the plumbing, check for all leaks. So when we actually perform an audit, we turn on all the faucets, all the showers, everything everywhere, and actually get under there and make sure that nothing's leaking. cut up in the belly wrap in a couple areas where those plumbing fixtures are to make sure that it's not hidden and just soaked up in the underbelly in there. Always, obviously, don't want to call back later to find out that we've made a mess somewhere.
Never experienced that before, by the
No,
way. Never had a single one.
Of
Never.
course not. And kind of doing them a service of walking through to find any problems that we could be seeing, and obviously open up sales opportunities, because if you are seeing plumbing leaks, we can fix that too. As we said a couple slides ago, we do that too. So yeah, checking over all of that just to make sure that whatever we're about to encapsulate is not going to later create a mess.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how many people in here are actually working in mobile homes currently? How many of the contractors and companies? Okay, just curious.
Interesting.
Trevor, you want to talk about polybutylene?
Polybutylene. This is an old pipe style from the mid 70s to the mid 1990s. It was inexpensive and easy to install this. That's why it was in a lot of them. You probably don't see a lot of it too much anymore, just because it's already been replaced because of how bad it was. Mm-hmm. But this is one, if we see this in a house, we do not like to encapsulate it because of how brittle it is and how more often than not, it's going to break at some point. So we try to, if we are going to encapsulate it, we would want to replace all of the plumbing lines that are incorporated with
and one of the real easy ways to identify it is it's typically gray piping that you're going to find, and it really depends on the age of that mobile home. I will tell you, some of the older ones that you're looking at that could be built in the late 70s, early 80s, you will find a lot of this piping in there. So when we do find this, one of the things that we're looking at doing at that point is a full repipe of that mobile home and changing that all out for PEX, because this stuff is just an absolute nightmare. It's typically, a lot of times it's flexible, it's sometimes curved. Again, as Trevor said, very brittle, breaks easy, very, very much known for leaks over time. So these are just a couple quick photos of obviously a water heater and what you're looking for. Water heaters, obviously the two different types of water heaters you're going to find in a mobile home. Typically going to be either just a standard electric, or you're going to find a mobile home rated direct vent water heater. Now, what's always fun is when you go into a mobile home and you've got just an atmospheric vented water heater that's not mobile home rated. So for those of you NYSERDA contractors that are out there doing work with the program, obviously that's going to have to be one of the things that you have to correct and fix if you're in there doing your assessment. So next, obviously, insulation or lack thereof. What are we looking at? So according to the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, those who owned a manufactured home spent more money on their energy bills than on home loans, spent twice as much on energy costs per square foot than those who owned a traditional single-family home. So if you are someone that has done an energy assessment at some point of a mobile home and you go to do your initial evaluation of the utility costs, you usually gasp, because you're basically shocked at how much money they're spending on their utilities. I can't tell you how many times, how many times I'll walk into a home and let's say it's propane, delivered fuels. And you talk to the customer about how much they're roughly spending, do a quick analysis of their bills, and they're purchasing well over 1,000 gallons of LP. Even worse, if it's kerosene or oil, same thing. Some of the houses that have a furnace with an inadequate duct system or inadequate ductwork in general, using space heaters, you go to look at their electric usage and it's through the roof, 1,500, 2,000 kilowatt hours a month. So obviously one of the things that we're looking at again is the insulation as a whole. And so why do these homes leak so badly? Why do these homes have high utility bills? So it's going to be primarily due to the heating and cooling needs of the home. Lower heat loads means smaller heat pumps, means less electrical demand and cost. Again, the biggest thing that we're looking at in a mobile home when we go to look at electrification is insulation and air sealing. That's got to be the first step every single time. Obviously, if you're a NYSERDA certified contractor, you're very aware of all the guidelines and everything that you have to adhere to. Obviously, you have to be below 12 air changes, which sometimes is very tough to get to. 12 air changes sounds like a crazy big number. In a mobile home, it's not always easy to get to. So what are we looking at for insulation and what areas are we trying to air seal? Underbellies are going to be your main culprit. Jeff talked earlier about the nip tuck rule and utilizing and basically encapsulating the rim joist. We'll get into that a little bit later. I will tell you, we have on here attic spaces. We usually stay clear as a company from insulating mobile home attics. Main reason for that is It's not always the easiest thing to do. We have definitely experienced the trials and tribulations of how difficult it can be. So we usually are staying clear of that if we absolutely don't have to. We've done it before, kind of like to avoid it if we can. And to be honest with you, I think for anybody that's doing this work out in the field and is working in these homes, most people are going to tell you and they're going to argue that that's really not the big area of concern. It's going to be underneath. Connections for modulars, and then obviously one of the big things, especially in some of these older mobile homes, is poor quality windows and doors. Young lady?
Okay. Adding insulation to the belly. Like you said, this is our main focus when we're looking at insulating a mobile home or manufactured home. This is where you're losing a ton of your heat. You've got the joints, you've got all of the metal framing underneath there. You've got ripped open underbellies. All the insulation fiberglass is all ripped out. So by tightening this up, it's going to increase the thermal performance, make a huge reduction in the air leakage. And then the big thing that we hear all the time after we go in and spray underneath is the comfort of these customers' floors is tenfold difference. So really going to notice a comfort difference, and then the energy savings is greatly there because you're also helping to insulate all of the ductwork underneath as well. So that's where we notice a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common complaints that we hear from residents that are living in these homes almost all the time is my floors are freezing cold. My feet are cold, I'm freezing, I got to wear slippers all the time. And that's one of the biggest areas that you see as an improvement if you're doing a good job encapsulating that underbelly. When we go back for our quality assurance, quality assurance inspections, that's always one of the things that we hear from a customer. Oh man, it's so nice. I can walk around barefoot in my house during the wintertime, even on the coldest days. So this just basically shows you your typical construction in a manufactured and a mobile home. That's kind of what you're looking at and what you're dealing with. So what are we doing and how are we adding insulation to the belly? What factors do you want to consider? First thing is one of the biggest ones. Do you have enough clearance? I would say 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be an issue. I have definitely run into situations before where you might have 2 feet of clearance on one end, but then as you're walking down, you're realizing that the skirting's getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And then as you look at it and you get to the very end, you realize this home's basically sitting on the ground. You know, how am I getting to that point? The reality is you're either doing 2 things. You're either going to try to have to dig that out if it's dirt underneath and not a concrete slab, or you're not going to. You just can't get to it. So that's certainly one thing to look at. Plumbing leaks. Obviously, again, we talked about that earlier. You want to do a good inspection of the plumbing. Structural problems. Standing water or open sewage. Oh my goodness, we run into this a lot. So you open up the skirting, you have no idea what you're opening the skirting to see, and you just get a gasp of whether it be cat urine or cat feces, or you've got a sewage line or a drain line that's been leaking for months. And the reality is, a lot of times these homeowners, they don't even realize it. They don't recognize it. They're not crawling underneath. They're going to have no idea they have a plumbing leak. They're going to have no idea they have a sewage leak. They're going to have no idea that cats have made their home for months and months and months underneath. And I can tell you, both our home solutions experts and our crews have found a little bit of everything underneath over the years. Major obstructions, you want to evaluate the condition of the existing underbelly. Certainly look for electrical hazards. Look at the construction with the existing components in the floor system. But again, this bottom line is one of the big things that if you are out doing this work, always keep the health and safety of your workers at the forefront all the time. These are not fun jobs. They're not easy jobs. We typically are compensating our guys with pay for production. They're usually getting bonuses doing these. And some of these, you're asking them to crawl around in some areas where they may have to clean up some of that stuff that we're talking about. They may have to go out and buy some lime and sprinkle that down. And these are not fun jobs. So always making sure that you're, keeping the health and safety of your employees is a super important thing in these situations. So I'll let you talk about the next slide here, Trev.
All right. And this, obviously you can see the manufactured underbelly, where the ductwork is, how that belly is sustained. A big thing, again, is going to be that rim joist as well. Jeff had brought it up earlier. As much as we just insulate the belly, there's still a gap in between there where all your ductwork is, your water lines, and if you don't seal that off from the rim joist, you're not really doing much. We've had it where a crew forgets. No one's perfect. Crew forgets to do the rim joist. Well, we find out that after the fact when the blower door number is still almost the same as it was.
Yeah, we've done case studies on this before, and this is where I know Jeff had mentioned this morning that he was a huge advocate for this and was a big piece of NYSERDA starting to approve this. I think Hal was a big part of that too. And when we're typically spraying a belly, what we're doing is we're putting 2 inches on what we call the membrane or the main portion of the belly, but then you're cutting that rim joist back, and we're doing 3 inches on the perimeter on the edges. So we had jobs, excuse me, before where we were not doing that. We were not necessarily cutting out the rim joist. We weren't necessarily applying more foam around the perimeter. We had jobs where we went back, and even after we sprayed and then we cut out the rim joist and did that after the fact, we were able to drop that blower door down anywhere from 500 to 1,000 CFMs more just by doing that. It makes a world of difference in these situations and in these scenarios. Again, this really ties into, again, the construction concept of basically how things are built. You got your main beam, you got your outrigger beams. Obviously, typically you got a rodent barrier, and then you got your floor joist. So, and then obviously, more often than not, or it should be pretty much all the time, your ducts and your water lines are going to be tucked up into that belly. Yes, ma'am.
When you say you cut out the rim joist and put more, what do you mean by that?
So our guys are actually basically cutting those areas roughly. I don't know how many inches are coming out. I wish Kevin was in here.
About 6, but I think there's
It's not really cutting the rim joist. It's cutting the belly
Here we go.
around the entire perimeter, spraying up into the rim joist.
Yeah.
And then sealing that back up with more spray foam.
Yeah, so these are obviously what we're talking about here. These are the edges and the perimeter. And it's basically it's the equivalent of treating a rim joist in a traditional basement. But what we're actually doing is you have to cut that insulation back to actually get to it. And that's what we, many years ago, we weren't doing that. And then all of a sudden, light bulbs went off and said, hey, maybe we're not doing the right thing here. Started to go back to a couple of jobs, and all of a sudden you can pick up and recognize very quickly that it makes a world of difference. So this is a quick video. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this actually kind of shows the process of what we're doing. And it is an older video, by the way, but it actually shows the process of what our guys are doing when they're out spray foaming one of these bellies. And again, it's 7 minutes long, so I'm going to skip through a couple pieces, but this gives you a pretty good idea of what you're dealing with a lot of times. You open it up and it looks like a big pink party in there because you got all the insulation falling down.
So anytime we do have that happening, we would remove that and apply like Tyvek house wrap.
Yeah, so that's what he's doing right here. He's basically creating another solid surface to spray against. Obviously, you can't just spray against this falling fiberglass. So a lot of times when you got the stuff that's falling, we're going to yank that out for the most part, put up a new Tyvek or a new, again, this is an older video, but put up new plastic or Tyvek that we got so we have something solid to spray against. Yeah, you can keep going through.
through here.
And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, these are not fun jobs.
What is the minimum clearance for that kind of?
So what we typically use as kind of a rule of thumb, anything that's less than like 16 inches, we're probably not getting underneath there. It's going to be almost impossible.
Alright, so this one, he's got the whole belly wrapped at this point. And then, I don't know if they do it anymore, honestly. Maybe you guys know, but some of them used to use baffles on like the really bad spots to like reframe.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's doing in this right now. And let's try to get to lots of fixing on this.
Yeah, there's a lot of repair, but now we're actually
Now
spraying.
There we go.
And again, I mean, especially like in the summertime, these guys are wearing full Tyveks. They're wearing respirators when it's 90 degrees outside. Or flip side of that, doing it this time of the year, freezing cold outside, and these guys are crawling around outside. That's why you always want to make sure that not only are you keeping the health and safety of your crews, in the forefront of your mind, but also making sure that you're basically compensating them correctly for jobs like this, because they're not easy nor fun jobs. You can keep going along a little bit more.
The picture. There you go.
Yeah. Looks like a good time.
Yeah.
I think we get the gist and get the idea. Yeah, that's a real good shot of them actually spraying.
That's what I was trying to find. Just guessing over here.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So air sealing, obviously foaming the belly. What just happened? Oh, foaming the belly can obviously reduce the blower door reading by 30% or more. I'm going to be perfectly honest. This is probably not the best example because I can tell you the amount of homes that we're going into that are 1670 is minimal. Most times we're finding it 3,000, 3,500. And I would argue that if I went through and looked at the majority of our mobile home jobs, we're getting probably close to a 50% reduction most of the time on a mobile home. You're making a world of difference by spraying these bellies. Obviously, we have in here cutting back to get to the rim joist can be another 10%. It can be more than that. It honestly could be 20%. But again, it all relates back to huge energy and comfort savings, and it's all part of, is it an actual real fit to be able to electrify a mobile home? Well, it's not if you're not doing this first. This just shows some roof components of a manufactured home, kind of the different things you're going to see. You got a bowstring truss assembly here, strong back ridge beam here, metal roofing, and then you got your roof sheathing. Two different types of basically trusses. You got your conventional gable roof truss or a conventional scissor truss. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because, like I said, this is something we really rarely ever do. Did it for a bit, and just the horror stories afterwards are not fun. So when you're using any methods where you're going through the roof, how many times do you think you're probably getting calls for some sort of a roof leak? More often than you want. And it's one of the main reasons that we just stopped doing this altogether.
The other issues too is like the strength of the ceiling below. Like a lot of these are panels or, barely held together sometimes on the ceiling. So unless you're like actually drywalled and mudded, you're going to be hard pressed to be able to dent back those ceilings.
This is a method that we will use and have used in the past. This obviously makes it a lot easier to do from the gable end. Certainly a lot of times you'll actually have vents cut in, and obviously you can shove a hose through on both sides and blow in cellulose. It's tough a lot of times to air seal an attic unless you're able to fully open that gable up like you saw in that photo, because a lot of times you're dealing with very minimal space. Typically you're talking 2 feet peak to floor, sometimes less. Windows and doors, we talked a little bit about this. Manufactured home windows and doors are unique. They're really not standard sizes. They require specific materials. The doors, especially if you're somebody that's been in and out of mobile homes, you notice a lot of times if it's an older one, they get beat up, super worn out, warped, things like that. Go ahead, Trev.
Existing electrical service, 100 amp breaker or 60 amp fuses. We've run into those, especially with the older mobile homes, which at that point it makes it tough. Especially when we're trying to electrify this home, trying to install heat pumps through the program. There are off-house meters, pedestals in the park, buried utility lines, so it all overcomplicates things. It's not, it's very rare that there's a pole, 20 feet away and it's an overhead service. It's very, very rare.
It's almost never.
Yeah.
How many people in here do electrical upgrades? Anybody do electrical service upgrades? Okay. Yeah, mobile homes, it's almost never an overhead service upgrade. It's almost always underground. So you're having to dig some sort of a trench, replace the wire. It's a lot more expensive than a traditional overhead service upgrade. Totally different application than most traditional homes. So your existing service, typically what you're gonna have is you're almost never going to walk into a house, into a mobile home to find a 200 amp service. It's almost always a 100 amp service. And sometimes you can actually be tricked and it's actually only a 60 amp service. Most manufactured homes and parks or on private land have 100 amps or less of service. Again, not a huge ordeal if they heat and use for their hot water and cooking or fossil fuels. But when you start to add up the rest of those things, and if it is all electric, then it does become a little challenging. You got an electric dryer, that's 30 amps. You got an electric stove, that's 50 amps. You got an electric water heater, that's another 30 amps. And then if you add the heat pump in, that can be anywhere from 30 to 50, depending on, obviously what size system you're putting in. And then obviously in these situations, at least for us, we don't do any all ductless solutions. We do not offer that for mobile homes. Anybody in here have any idea why we wouldn't want to do that? So the reason that we don't do it is simply because you've got your water lines in the underbelly. And yes, you're going to go through and you're going to encapsulate that underbelly. But doing all ductless eliminates your duct system altogether. You're getting no waste heat off of your duct system to keep your water lines warm. You can do the best possible job of encapsulating your underbelly and spraying the underbelly, but you're still at risk of water lines freezing. So by eliminating the duct system and going all ductless, you really are putting the customer at risk of frozen pipes. So that's one of the reasons that we steer completely clear of doing all ductless as an actual design for a mobile home. And then it just talks down here about auxiliary heat kits. Obviously, for those of you that are installing heat pumps, if you're putting in a ducted system, I'm assuming most all of you are doing that auxiliary heat kit as well. And those can be, typically in a mobile home, the biggest that we're gonna do is usually gonna be like a 5 or an 8 kW system. There is obviously 10 kW auxiliary heat kits, but you're gonna have a tough time getting a 10 kW heat kit, a heat pump, a water heater, a cooking range, and a dryer, especially if you're not upgrading to a 200 amp service. It's almost impossible. Shows you some of the things you're going to run into. Obviously, fuse boxes, that's a big no-no. And then depending on what you're dealing with, either a 50 or 100 amp breaker with your main service. So again, off-house meters. This gentleman over here said he was doing electrical services, so I'm sure he's run into it. A lot of times you've got a home that's 60 yards away, and then your pole is here. So you've got to basically do an underground electrical service, which again, more costs, more material costs, more labor. These are not usually straightforward, easy services to do. They are very doable, but it's much different from doing a traditional service upgrade at a home with, just your typical overhead service. Most meters are not in the house. A lot of times there's a common meter or common meter pedestals in parks, or what we call a common transformer. Buried service cable like we're talking about with underground services, and then there's a lot of times where we have to rebuild a meter. I'll let you go.
Okay. So solutions for these things. We're going to, obviously, if we've determined we need 200 amps, we have to figure out how to get us 200 amps. So solution obviously would be upgrade the 200 amp panel. We have found like semi-creative ways of making this work sometimes. I will say like one thing that we have found is you could have 200 amps at the pole and where the meter is, but you've only got 100 amps inside. So we've gotten a little more creative because putting a 200 amp box in the house isn't always the option in a mobile home. So sometimes we're leaving that 100 amp box, but putting another 100 amp outside to get the power to the heat pump outside. And obviously only trenching that little bit to the house. So you got to be creative sometimes. Like I said, largest breaker box that can fit, relocating the meters if possible and if necessary. We do have to rebuild a lot of meter stands, sometimes potentially even have to get new poles. Like things have to be obviously stable where the meter, and if you have a meter panel combo where that sits outside, that needs to all be stable. And like I said, you may have to trench either from where your new meter is going to be to the house, or where you're putting your heat pumps outside to a new panel, whatever that may look like. So not every situation is the same. So it's a fun little challenge sometimes.
Yeah, I would say almost never is it the same.
Never.
It's almost always different in all the different mobile homes that you're going to walk into. These are just photos of a few of the jobs that we've done in the past. And then, the other thing that you're dealing with some of these panels is they're found in a bedroom. It's a very small little panel, and basically you open the bedroom door, it's on the right-hand side, and it's a small, tiny little panel. Sometimes it's on an interior wall above the bed. You got an interior, a common wall between the bathroom and the bedroom, and it's stuck on that. So definitely obstacles and challenges to run into, all things you can overcome. But a lot of times with the actual electrical service portion of it, you sometimes do need to get a little creative.
In a mobile home in a park, in a mobile home on private land somewhere, look entirely different.
Yeah.
So obviously you've got, in parks, you've got more of those lined up meters, like I think it was the one before, but the lined up meters, yeah, like that, with a bunch of the underground services splitting off. You're chasing wires, you're figuring out who goes where and how do you get power to this house and not mess with this house. So it's a lot different when you go.
Yeah, and so go ahead, Trevor. One thing I would say as a recommendation and as advice to anybody that might be looking to venture into working on these homes, build good relationships with park owners. Always make sure that you're reaching out ahead of time before you're doing any of the work. Don't just assume they're going to be comfortable and okay with you digging up the ground to do a new electric service, putting an outdoor unit on, outside for a heat pump. Always check and make sure and make good with those parks, because the reality is, 99% of the time, unless there's some odd situation, like the homeowner owns the home, but they don't own the land, right? So that's why you always want to make sure you're talking to the park ahead of time and giving them an idea of what you're doing. We've definitely years ago had situations where didn't make that phone call ahead of time. We stick an outdoor unit outside, or we're digging a trench outside, and we're getting a phone call from the park owner saying, "What the hell are you guys doing? What's going on?" We didn't get a phone call ahead of time. So super, super important. Go ahead, Joe.
HVAC issues and distribution, heat pump conversions. Obviously, after insulating the house, bringing that blower door down, making it as tight as we possibly can. Now we are looking at potential heat pumps. Obviously, not as simple as let's just throw a heat pump in the house. The biggest thing is that ductwork limitations. In that mobile home, under that belly, ductwork is about that big. You're looking at about 3 inches, 3 to 4 inches by 10 to 12. Compared to our classic systems in a basement or somewhere, you're dealing with an 8 by 20 main trunk, where this is very small. So we have CFM limitations. Due to that, as much as we want to keep that heat inside of that. So that's why we were looking at a smaller heat pump for the ductwork, and then still utilizing ductless heads. Space for equipment, obviously. We are working with limited space. It is a manufactured home. So, we can't just throw one simple 4-ton air handler, because it actually will not fit in that closet. So that there's that limitations. And obviously also ductless heads, trying to make sure we have space on an exterior wall. Obviously, yes, we can do an interior wall, but it's how do we get to it? And how do we, I always tell people we want to think about serviceability after the fact as well. But yes, that is the big issues with what we are dealing with. Most manufactured homes have undersized ductwork, like I said, and it all comes down to CFM. I always try to tell people, tell customers, that air handler, that's your heart, and that ductwork is your arteries. If you don't have enough CFM to be able to be moved, that system is always going to be overworked and not going to be able to give you comfort that you need in the house. And you're going to be calling me late at night when you're not comfortable, and that's not what I want either. So usually we are sticking with anywhere between a 1.5 to 2 ton air handler. I will say we are actually we are doing some experimenting with double wides specifically, upscaling that system to a 3-ton, and installing a crossover duct right off of the heat pump. So as soon as right below where that air handler is, we were installing a large 12-inch flex duct that goes over to the other main trunk on the other side, if there is with the double wide. To be able to help with that airflow, to try to go with a single zone 3-ton system for the house.
I would say up until probably the last 3 to 6 months, we always took the approach with the mobile home that we never did a 1-to-1 ducted system, just because there's just so many question marks and there's such a risk to relying on that mobile home ductwork. Mobile home ductwork is not always the most efficient, properly sized, properly designed system, because you're working in a very limited space. So the typical approach that we would take is, like Trevor was saying, a 1.5 ton to a 2-ton air handler. And then what we would do is, the way that we would look at it is, that air handler is going to serve the bedrooms, the bathroom, maybe the kitchen area. And then what we did is connected and put a large ductless head in the main living space, so that customer, essentially, they're making sure that in the area that they're spending the most time in, they have true zone heating and cooling in their main living area. That's typically the approach that we're taking with these systems. Like Trevor just said, we are starting to experiment a little bit with potentially looking at doing 1-to-1 ducted systems. But again, it does take duct modifications, and if that's a belly that you've already sprayed, that becomes challenging. You got to cut through all that brand new foam that you've already sprayed, et cetera, et cetera. So the typical approach, like I said, is going to be a multi-zone system. With a small air handler and then a ductless head in the main living area. And it's worked, knock on wood, it's worked very well for us. We've installed hundreds of these in mobile homes over the years, and we've had very good luck with it. So again, this talks more about undersized ductwork, especially for your heat pumps and AC. The prior slide I'll show real quick, single wide, usually one trunk down the middle. Your trunk sizes are they're basically gonna vary from 4 to 6 inches tall, 12 to 16 inches wide. At most, you're gonna be able to accommodate is gonna be somewhere between 400 and 600 CFMs. So again, that's why we're sticking to either a 1.5 or a 2-ton air handler. And it does limit your air handler replacement of the furnace due to the airflow. And as Trevor said, the actual physical space that you have in the furnace cabinet. In a double wide, a little bit different. You got one trunk with usually a crossover duct to the parallel trunk. Your trunk sizes are gonna vary, 3 to 6 inches tall, 12 to 16 inches wide. And then you'll have a 12 to a 14-inch crossover duct to a second trunk. You're going to accommodate at most probably 400 to 800 CFM, so usually a 2-ton air handler, same thing as we talked about before. But the big thing is we like to try to hard pipe the crossover duct to increase airflow, and then you're also spraying it, because that crossover duct a lot of times is actually going to be underneath the belly itself. So we also are spraying that too. I kind of already touched on this, but multi-zone heat pump options. So you do a ducted air handler to replace the furnace, largest it can be accommodated, and then you do a ductless to kind of balance out the heat loads, usually in the largest space of the home or the largest bedroom. You can leave that onus on the customer and basically let them make that decision for themselves and decide where do they prefer that ductless head to be. Some customers are going to say, I don't want it in the living room. I'd actually prefer to be able to control, my master bedroom. Okay, no problem. We can do that too. But as we talked about before, that ducted air handler, that's typically going to be serving the smallest spaces in the house. For a single zone, you do one ductless unit in the main space, and then you use like an existing fossil fuel furnace or point of use heating as needed. A ducted air handler, assuming it can satisfy the heat load, and you can use electric baseboard as a supplement. So we've had customers before that have said, hey, I'm not going to go through NYSERDA, I'm not going to do this. I don't want to just rip my furnace out. Well, you can throw in a single zone ductless in the main living space, and then obviously they're using their furnace to take care of the bedrooms, bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. This actually shows some different applications that we've done. Looks very odd because you're probably saying to yourself, is that air handler upside down? It actually is. It is upside down. You have to actually install them upside down because they're upflow units. To this point, now we're an LG dealer, and to this point, they don't have a downflow application. So we actually are flipping the air handlers upside down, and that's the way we install them. You got your return box on top here. Obviously, your line set penetrates through and goes down through the line through the underbelly. Then obviously, you got your condensate here. Ductless head, as we talked about, probably in the main living area, the biggest space, and then there's your double stacked outdoor unit. So this kind of, again, shows you the approach that we're typically taking. So this is a single wide with an air handler and a ductless system. So your air handler is obviously going to be typically, in the center or in the middle of the mobile home. And then we're putting that ductless unit in the main living space because that's generally going to be more often than not the biggest room in the house itself. Double wide could be a little different. You might take the approach where you're going to do 2 ductless heads with a very small air handler. It depends on obviously what your heat load's calling for. So again, your furnace is here with an air handler here, and then maybe you're putting a ductless in the master bedroom and a ductless in the living room. It all comes down to appropriate and proper sizing, appropriate and proper design. But I made the comment in Jeff's presentation this morning, and he was talking about the importance of blower doors. I can't reiterate enough how much I agree with him. And I made the comment this morning that if you're an HVAC contractor and you're out running manual J's, running heat loads, and you're not doing a blower door, you are doing your customer a complete disservice and dissatisfaction. You really are. How can you appropriately and properly do a true manual J on a house when you have no idea how leaky or how tight that house is? I will argue that till the day I die. I firmly believe in it. Hal stands by it. It doesn't matter what type of lead we're running. If it's an HVAC lead, at any given point, we're running a blower door every single time. You obviously want to look at your appliances, your appliances in the house. Heating and cooling, we talked a lot about. Hot water, what are they using to cook with? Is it an electric? Is it a fossil fuel? And then what are they using for the dry? Is it gas or is it electric? Young lady?
We just talked about this a little bit, but
Yeah, we did.
You're gonna have, obviously, you said, a lot of electric water heaters, or you're gonna have a mobile home rated fossil fuel. Heat pump water heaters are more efficient than your standard electric. However, they're not suitable for mobile homes, so we're not installing them in mobile homes. Traditional electric water heaters are going to be your best fit in a mobile home. Cooking, if you have the load for it, a lot of people obviously have the option to switch towards electrification now, but that's still where all that electric comes into a balance of, can you do the heat pump? Can you do the electric water heater? Can you do whatever you got working? If they have a heat, or if they have a hot tub, throw it out the window. You don't get your electric stove.
You know, one of the, go ahead.
Why are heat pump water heaters not suitable for mobile homes?
So my answer to that would be two things: A, noise, and then B, heat pump water heaters are typically designed and are going to work best in a wide open basement, and they're going to naturally cool the space that they're in because they're actually pulling some of that humidity out of the air. So it's not a good fit for a manufacturer mobile home.
And the manufacturer actually says it requires X amount of square footage.
Yeah.
So
Probably won't fit through the door either.
Right.
That's a good point too. That's a great point. That's a great point. That's a great point. Might not fit through the door. The other thing with heat pump water heaters is they're pretty tall. So they're also, they're a lot taller than a traditional electric water heater. So you're dealing with that too. So, go ahead, Trev.
Obviously a dryer, that's going to be on there, potentially for the load. Other loads: refrigerator, freezer, dishwasher, washing machine, well pumps, lights. Obviously, anytime we are doing these, we are also doing an NEC load. That's, I believe John Parrott did a talk on earlier today, and making sure that we can fit this all under that 100 amp service. And that's another reason why we have been looking at the single zone system, a single ducted system, so we can get creative and squeeze this under that 100 amp service.
Yeah, doing an NEC load, and I missed John's presentation this morning, and doing an NEC load is crucial in these situations. You have to have a full understanding of what type of load capacity you're putting on that panel to understand, can I get everything on what I have now without having to do a service upgrade, or do I need to look at going from 100 amps to 200 amps? So super crucial in these situations. I mean, really in any home, but specifically definitely in mobile homes. So costs. Obviously, we know that for the most part, nothing's free. Even with state and local incentives, these kind of projects can carry a cost. Idea is to sell the homeowner on the benefits of electrification. So how do we do that? Removing fossil fuels from the home, reducing their operating costs. Obviously, you're adding air conditioning. 9 times out of 10, when you go into a mobile home, what do you see? Usually window AC units. And honestly, there's a lot of parks that you walk into where it's primarily retired people. 75, 80-year-old people do not want to have to be able to put in a window AC and take it out every year. They're usually calling their grandson to come over and do it, especially for the little old ladies that live by themselves. They're not wanting to do that every summer. So this obviously gives them true central AC. They don't have to worry about that anymore. Not to mention that those window shaker ACs are not energy efficient at all. They're gonna hike up their bills in the summertime massively. And obviously the other big thing with this is we're making the home more comfortable. Look at your local incentives. You can stack them with financing options or payments are close to savings. In some instances, what we found for those how many are NYSERDA contractors in here? Just Jeff? Really? A couple? All right. Using the Green Jobs loan as a NYSERDA contractor, a lot of times you'll find that the monthly payments are going to be far less than what they're saving on their utility bills. And it honestly becomes a no-brainer for those customers that have the credit to be able to do it. These projects really can be a no-brainer with what they're going to save on their actual NYSEG RG&E bill or what they're going to save in propane or oil. They pay for themselves very, very quickly. So in conclusion, I'm sorry.
What sort of cost gap are you finding in terms of program, what's coming under program versus things that aren't coming under program?
Yeah, that's a great question. It varies. I will tell you, we've definitely had projects where we were able to get something in for no cost for customers. Many times we've done that. I would say that more often than not, and I'll let you two chime in a lot more. You guys are out in the trenches every day. I don't think homeowners, if they're NYSERDA eligible, they're not coming out of pocket for more than somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 total.
The biggest discrepancy there is when it's an underground service.
Yeah.
Obviously with the new IRA being $1,000. That's pretty much just the cost of a regular simple upgrade.
Yeah.
You know, but now I got to trench 70 yards.
Yeah.
That's a different story. So that's the biggest part that we see is going to be an out of pocket. Also, sometimes when it's just a larger double wide, you know, sometimes they can be pretty large, 1,600, 1,800 square feet. So making sure it's having that, you just need more equipment.
Yeah.
Just sometimes a single zone just can't do it.
Yes, sir.
While you're on that subject of the new surface, when you're in a park, is there coordination? Because now you're on, not on the tenants.
Definitely can be.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you got to really get buy-in from
Yeah.
the park going.
Yeah, I don't know if you were in here when I first said that. No, you're good. That's why I just made the comment to always be in touch with the park owners. Anytime, really, and that really just goes for any work that you're doing in a mobile home. Because again, like I said, homeowner owns the home, but they don't own the land that it sits on. So when it comes to anything being done, outside or anything like that. And the other thing too, just to take a step back, just spraying an underbelly, usually we're making that call ahead of time because we've had parks say, can't do it. We don't want you doing that. Now, their reasoning behind it is pretty silly and foolish because what happens is their maintenance men, they don't want to cut through the foam. You don't want to cut through the foam, but you're okay with cutting through Tyvek, having to rip out fiberglass and do all that. So you're doing the same thing. Spray foam is actually pretty easy to cut through. You can just take a putty knife and you're able to cut through it. So to say I don't want to cut through spray foam, but you're going to have your guys out cutting through Tyvek, cutting through plastic, cutting through fiberglass, ripping that out, you're actually doing more work doing that than you are cutting through actual spray foam. But we've definitely had parks that said, no spray foaming underbellies, and there's nothing you can do in those situations, unfortunately. So,
Even if they're tenant-owned homes, they can shut that down.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yep.
We had that other way on one whole place, someone went in without permission.
Yeah.
Nothing happened until a leak happened.
Yep.
They had to go find it. They couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It was a disaster.
Yeah.
You guys ever blow fiberglass on the belly?
We don't. We've never done that, never taken that approach. I know a lot of the weatherization agencies, that's the approach that they take. We've never personally done it, so I can't speak to the results that it does. Have you guys ever done that, Jeff?
Not really. I would say once we actually had nice SWATA come out and train us on it, and it's just, if you're gonna roll around in the mud,
Yeah.
foam's a better product.
It really is. It really is. That's a great point. That's a great point.
So, I was talking to our program manager for the Empower program.
Mhm.
And they let me know the underbelly isn't covered as projects and approved projects go. But I'm assuming that it has been.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I needed to clarify.
I'm going to be honest, I don't mean to use this term, but it's our bread and butter. I mean, our guys, they love, especially being on P4P, pay for production. Our installation guys love doing these because they can go and hit 2 in a day. It's in the same park. They can go spray 2 bellies in a day. But yeah, the only times that we've run into issues or challenges getting a job through and approved, sometimes natural gas jobs don't show great savings, especially in some of the newer homes that are already pretty well insulated with a blower door where you might already be at 8 to 10 air changes. Yeah, you might have a tough time getting some of those jobs through. But certainly delivered fuels, propane, fuel oil, you don't usually see all electric mobile homes, but once in a while you can. Kerosene, those jobs are going to show tremendous savings and you should have no problems getting them through. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I know for a long time, they aren't approving any of our heat pump jobs unless that belly spray foam.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Yes, ma'am. Do you have a question? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had a question. I apologize. Yes, sir.
What are the worst case scenarios you've seen as far as pitfalls when the guys are spray foaming under there, like covering up the venting pipe or the furnace? Or...
You want me to tell you the absolute worst?
Yeah.
We definitely sprayed a cat in once. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'll just tell you we did. I'll just tell you we've done it. I won't lie. I got nothing to hide. If Hal was in here, he'd say you got to tell the truth. Yeah. No, we did that. We definitely done that once. We've definitely sprayed and affected ductwork or venting.
Water heater.
Oh yeah, you know what I'm talking. Yeah.
The screw outlets. we've made the mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just curious.
Yeah.
Some of the guys want to watch out for it.
Yeah. No, those are the things. Honestly, one of the minor things and easy things that you can hit sometimes is obviously, you're going to have your main water line coming up into that belly, and a lot of times that's going to be covered with heat tape. Just make sure that your guys are being leery of the outlet or the plug that heat tape is plugged into. You don't want to hit that. For the most part, the nice thing is you really are not going to have a ton of obstacles that you're going to have to overcome for the most part. As far as worrying about damaging anything, a lot of times it's rough work because they're crawling around in 2 feet of space, and so the other big obstacles, like I said, are to really make sure that any plumbing leaks are taken care of ahead of time. We've definitely had sewage leaks where our guys have had to go and buy, was it lime deposits that we're typically putting down, and then you lay down some either OSB or plywood or something, and they're not always fun, clean, easy jobs. So, yes, sir.
When you talk about replacing the piping, does NYSERDA cover that?
You talking about the crossover duct?
Yeah, that PV piping.
Oh no. We're typically, we're generally going to have, we'd have to have a real experienced plumber out doing it by himself, and he'd be there for a full day, but it's usually 2 guys that are going to be there for the majority of the day repiping a mobile home.
If not two.
If not longer.
If it's a large one, because you're just crawling underneath.
The right crew can get it done in a day. A less experienced crew, they might be there for a day and a half, 2 days doing it. Yeah. So going back to what we were saying, again, first and foremost, you got to have a home that's energy efficient. It's got to be well insulated. It's got to be air sealed. And that obviously is not solely for mobile homes. That's across the board. For those of you that are installing heat pumps, I'm sure many of you have gotten the phone calls. Oh yeah, Dan in a van was just out here and did a great job, and he installed a 1-to-1, and it was only $4,000, but my utility bills are through the roof. Well, I wonder why. We go out, we run the blower door, and it's $6,000, and you got an uninsulated attic and an uninsulated basement. And those are the calls I know you're getting, Jeff. We get them all the time, and it's frustrating because there's too many contractors out there that are slamming these systems in, do not look at the building envelope, and don't belong in this industry. They just don't. Because unfortunately, what happens with that is customers get a false pretense that heat pumps are awful. They never wanted. They're terrible technology. That's not the reality. They're a great technology in the right application. Application is the most important piece. So installing them in an 1880s farmhouse that no insulation's been done in the last 60 years, yeah, that's not a good application. Installing them in a mobile home where you haven't air sealed, you haven't sprayed the belly, you haven't looked at the envelope as a whole, yeah, that's not a good application. So
Sometimes you got to tell customers you shouldn't have heat pumps in this house.
right.
It's got to be.
Yeah. So again, adequate electrical service and balanced loads, properly sized and designed heating system. And again, manufactured homes require more work than the average house, but there are 20 million Americans that live in manufactured homes that can benefit from electrification. Which I think it's a little scary and a little intimidating sometimes, so it's not, cut and dry, but it's very, very doable. And I will tell you that the results, generally speaking, at the end of the day, are going to be results that homeowner is going to be very, very happy with. Any other questions that anyone has? John, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
All right.
I was a little curious. Do you find that most houses need heat tape on their main plumbing supply?
My answer would be yes. It really would be. The problem with that too, to kind of, if somebody's wondering or asking, program's not going to pay for that either. That's going to be a homeowner's expense. They're not going to chip in. But the good news is usually you're only talking about a 4-foot exposed length of pipe. It's not super expensive. Obviously, if you want to install it, you can do it for the homeowner. It's a pretty minimal cost. But I would say yes, it really should be. Yeah. Any other questions at all? Yes, ma'am.
So we're thinking about, because so many organizations and heat pumps are focused on the liquid fuels and all that.
Yep.
And it seems like over the size that we might actually have a little bit more success. Some of our moment. We think about doing a little home campaign. What are some of the issues we have to help you might want in terms of helping attract parts and owners to this?
The biggest hurdle you are going to deal with right now is the natural gas. A
Right,
lot-
so avoiding natural gas ones, or targeting strictly parks.
I would target delivered fuel parks for sure.
That's the base one.
Yep.
I mean, the plus side is the savings.
Yeah.
You know, more often than not is your savings against your fossil fuels versus the electrification when it's, you know, when it's insulated, it's air sealed, everything like that, the amount of savings that a customer can have. And more often than not, they don't have AC in the house.
Yeah.
All the window ACs, they're running 3 window ACs, their electric bill's $200, $250 in the summertime because they're running that. And you know, you go into Mrs. Jones's house and they say, well, I can't run my toaster when I have my AC running
Right.
because of the electrical issues.
Yeah.
So that is usually what, you know, the easiest way to run the campaign on, I would say, is the savings. Just
By far. I mean, Lindsay, to take that even a step further, the amount of times that you're in and out of a mobile home and a customer says, oh yeah, my heating bills are usually around $350 a month. That's normal. No, that's not normal at all. That's the furthest thing from normal, but it's what they're accustomed to. It's what they're used to paying. You know, customers are accustomed to getting 6 propane deliveries throughout the course of the year, or 6 oil deliveries throughout the course of the year. Or, yeah, we have to run 2 space heaters, you know, during the wintertime because the furnace doesn't keep up and it doesn't keep me warm enough. That's totally normal. No, it's not normal. That's not a good thing. And that's where I would argue that I think a lot of times, and Jeff, I'd certainly welcome your opinion, we tend to show better results sometimes with mobile homes than we do a traditional 2-story home or a ranch or anything like that, because the utility costs are through the roof more often than not. Yes, sir.
A lot of the mobile homes are in bad situations.
Yep.
A lot of health and safety.
Yep.
And I wondered if you guys run into that. How do you tackle that? Like, for instance, not even just health and safety. Let's say you're going to do an electrical upgrade, and you know you're changing the breaker box or the pan and all that stuff. But throughout the walls, you know, you have residents that maybe, you know, this socket stopped working in 2011, so I started using this socket. Now this socket doesn't work, and so you got a whole massive problem with just electrical throughout. So even if you make the upgrades, you're still gonna have those problems throughout the house. And then you've got mold and you got other things like that too. How do you address some of those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure there's a you know, direct, straightforward, easy answer to give to you. Let's talk first quickly, and I know we're almost out of time. Very quickly about the health and safety side. The way that I personally approach, and the way that I always coach and educate our sales team and to handle any situations where there's a health and safety issue. When it comes specifically to NYSERDA projects for low to moderate income folks, I'm going to tell that customer, if I find an issue, if I go into a basement and a dog has used it as, you know, his area to go to the bathroom, or if I have a hoarder, if I have anything like that, the way that I typically approach that situation is to say, Mrs. Jones, I want to be your advocate through the program. I want to get as much work done as I possibly can in your home. I want to lower your utility costs. I want to keep the home more comfortable. I want to do everything I can to help you. Part of that process is I have to take photos of all areas of your home, and those photos are going to be uploaded to the state, and they're going to review those. Unfortunately, some of the conditions of your home could jeopardize that work being done and jeopardize some of the funding that I'm going to be able to secure. So in order for me to move forward, I think we got to try to figure out a way to take care of some of those areas. 9 times out of 10, a homeowner is going to say, I really appreciate that. You're being respectful to that homeowner, because I think anybody here that's been in those situations would say that homeowner they don't even realize that it's really an issue, because they're in and out of it every day. It's just second nature to them. But if you take the right approach, you're sympathetic, you really help them to understand that you're there to help them at the end of the day, and you want to help them, and you're not making them feel like they've done something wrong, I think that's the right approach to take. And that's usually what I've done in the past when it comes to health and safety. I miss anything? Okay.
Same thing. You know, sometimes if you want me to help you, I need you to help yourself for just a little bit, right? You know, I always tell them, I'm not running away. As much as it seems like I'm walking out the door on you, I just need you to help yourself a little bit, and I will then do everything I can.
I would argue that sometimes these are the hardest conversations I have with customers. They're difficult. They're very hard, because you don't want to offend them. You know, either the last thing you're looking to do is offend them, hurt their feelings, make you feel like you're above them. You're not above them. And I can tell you, And I've said this many times, and I put myself in situations where I wish I didn't do it, but it doesn't matter if I'm walking into a $20,000 mobile home that's been run down for the past 20 years, or I walk into $1 million mansion. I'm either taking my shoes off or I'm putting booties on. I treat everybody the same way. And we firmly believe in that as a company. And Hal has instilled that in everybody. It doesn't matter how much money this person has versus how much money this person has, or the condition of this house versus the condition of the house. You treat everybody the same way. As it relates to the second part of your question with the electrical, I'm going to let you answer that. Alicia's probably one of our most well-versed and educated on electrical because of her background that she had before she came to work here. So,
Yeah, so electrical is interesting with this outlet doesn't work, this doesn't work. Truthfully, if a line is dead, it's more of a hassle than it is a safety issue. But if you have like a broken wire or something in a wall and it's fly and that kind of thing, then yeah, that's absolutely something that's gonna like kind of stop some things until we can figure out what that's caused by. But if it's dead and it's a nuisance, we can only do so much, especially through low to mid moderate income households. You are gonna have limitations sometimes. So the one thing I will say to your first part of the question of mold, if we're finding mold and houses, basements, walls, wherever, we're not tightening up that house until we get to the root of where that mold is coming from.
And the remediation.
And the remediation. Yeah, because ultimately, now we have touched that house, we know we're gonna make it worse by tightening it up, making sure it can't breathe, all of these things. We're gonna own it later.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna make a better situation for that homeowner. So mold we're not touching, electrical, you really gotta take it case by case and figure out what the safety issue is versus the nuisance issue, and do as much as you can to help with the means that you are given.
I mean, the good news is if you are a NYSERDA contractor and you're able to work with some of the state funding, you've obviously got the electrical IRA and some of the extra funding that's available. So you may be able to create a larger than normal project and get some of that paid for, but it really is kind of a case by case basis. It's tough. Hopefully that answers your question. All right. Anything else? I know we're pretty much up on time. Really appreciate everybody being here. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.